Okay, where we left off is where Queen Titania has fallen in love with Nick Bottom, who has a donkey's head, right? This all comes from a play called A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. Long story short, it's a series of comedic events between the couples. And long story short, it's a happy ending for all couples. But I told you that story so I can show you this painting right here. It's called uh, Titania and Bottom. All right, and it's a big painting. It's the same kind of scale as a history painting. And Fuseli wanted to develop history painting, but beyond retelling of old events like history or mythology or uh, uh, the Bible. And so he is looking into literature then to find his stories, and he looks to uh, Shakespeare. And so Fuseli wanted to produce paintings that are based on literary and fantastical themes, like fantasy. So in this is the scene where Titania, the one in the center, has just fallen in love with Nick Bottom. You can see him there with the donkey head. And she is instructing all her fairies to do the bidding of Bottom. And this is all fantasy. You know, Titania looks like she's having a lot of fun here. And the fairies all have mischievous looks. And this painting is very theatrical, very similar to the Baroque. You know, it has a very shallow space like you would see on a small stage. It has lighting like you would see on a stage. That the backgrounds are often dark on a stage, and the lights hit only the actors. So all of this looks like a stage. There's even a couple of characters in here that are looking at the viewer, just like actors on stage would be catching the eye of members of the audience. And just some weirdness thought I could point out was these doll-like figures with this giant moth on the head, and this old man, this tiny little old man on a leash, right, by a fairy with a mischievous look. And then this is the stuff of nightmares right here. This changeling. The pose of Titania is very similar to that of Leonardo's drawing for Leda and the Swan. All right, I've got another story for you, and this one comes from Paradise Lost. It's a poem by John Milton. Have you read this? Yeah. So part of the story is that Lucifer is an angel, and before he is cast out of heaven, he's one of God's favorite angels, and he is enjoying being God's favorite angel. And then along comes Jesus, and Lucifer gets jealous of how special Jesus is to God, and he throws a big tantrum, right? Just like Alex throws big tantrums. And he throws this big hissy fit, and he accuses God of many things, and God's like, WTF. And so he gets together a bunch of rebellious angels, and he tries to make this coup, to take over heaven from God. Well, God puts the big smackdown on Lucifer and the rebellious angels. So he knocks Lucifer down to hell, and along with all the rebellious angels. And they create this place called Pandemonium. And that's where I'm going to stop the story, because that's where we pick up here. So in this painting by Fuseli, it's called The Shepherd's Dream. And it's based on the Paradise Lost by John Milton. And in Paradise Lost, the author explores the realms of the imagination, dreams, and the supernatural. So this is the moment in Milton's poem that compares the fallen angels in the hall of Pandemonium that I just showed you in hell to the fairies who bewitch a passing peasant with the sound of their music and their dancing. So the fairies are shown dancing above the sleeping shepherd, with one fairy touching the shepherd with a dream inducing wand. In the right hand corner is the queen of the fairies, who is the one who reveals to sleeping men their unutterable desires. You know what unutterable desires is? Is like things that you want to do but you can't tell anybody. Like, so you have to keep it to yourself. If you start saying crazy things, then they'll put you away. Especially, times ago, like in history, they'll call you a witch for having weird thoughts. And anyways, so Fuseli uses his powers of imagination a lot in his paintings, and he moves away from the traditional genre of history paintings. And this painting was a series of other paintings that were a commercial disaster, and that it was paintings like this that he realized that he needed to pursue a more academic path. All right, and then one final painting by Fuseli, this one right here. I'm showing you the size of the artwork. And here, this witch she is just about to sacrifice this small child. And she is distracted as she looks back at the arrival of the night hag. And that is the basics of what is going on here. Now, what you see the dagger that somebody is holding up. This is a witch's ceremony, and it looks a lot like the sacrifice of Isaac. Where Isaac was going to sacrifice his son for God, and that was a test to see if Isaac had faith in God or if he could do God's bidding. What's that? Isaac was the yes, yeah, I did get that backwards. Abraham could follow the instructions of God. Yes, I got that name right. Right. Okay. So, but this is blasphemous. It's almost the same image, but it's blasphemous because it is a witch's ceremony. And it's even blasphemous when you think about, this kind of refers to a pietà, and it is blasphemous also because it is a witch's ceremony. And you know that Christians of this era were looked very down on witchcraft. All right, so that covers Fuseli. So let's move on to Goya, and he is a Spanish artist. And let's take a look at this painting right here. This is a big one, and I show you this picture to show you the size of the artwork. So let's take a look at it. All right, so this is Charles IV of Spain and his family. Charles IV of Spain is the king. So I do believe I have. Yeah, there we go. He is the king, and then he's there with his wife, the queen. She has the son and the daughter there with her. And then if you look over on the left side, there's one that's wearing blue and one that's wearing orange. These are illegitimate children from the queen. She has had an affair with this guy right here, Manuel Godoy. And to tell you that what's kind of going on in this, the king is a very ineffectual and weak king. His wife, the queen, walks all over him, and basically she is the ruler of Spain and not the king. Even though the king is supposed to be in charge, he's supposed to be the one that's in total control, but he is a weakling, and his wife is overbearing. And then Manuel, her lover, is not only guiding her, but manipulating her as well. So this lover of the queen is also in charge of Spain, and the king is just kind of kicked to the curb. Right. So, but I want to show you this as one of the paintings by Goya because he was a court painter. Now, does this look like what we've seen with Romanticism? Does this look like, does it look romantic in the vein of like man versus nature or nature versus nature, or using your imagination and the dreams and all that? No, he's just simply a court painter painting what he's told to paint. All right, and I'm showing you this painting to show you this is what he did before, and I'll show you he made a huge change into Romanticism. All right, but one kind of fun thing about this painting is that it is highly influenced by Velázquez. We had, Velázquez had the painting, and so does Goya. Velázquez painted himself, so did Goya. All right. So we're going to move on from this court painter, and I'm going to show you his paintings of Romanticism. So I'm going to do you a little bit of a history lesson right here. So I told you how Napoleon is conquering all of Europe. And so while he's out fighting with Russia and Austria and Italy, he also wants to take over Portugal. And France and Spain are allies. And so Napoleon tells the king of Spain, hey, I want to get Portugal. I'd rather not sail. Can we just march through your country? And the ineffectual and weak king of Spain says, yeah, sure, why not? We're allies. What could go wrong? So that is basically what's going on here. So Spain helps France kick the English out of Portugal. And what this causes is that there's tons of French troops stationed all over Spain, and that causes problems. The French troops look down on the Spanish. They don't see the Spanish as equals or allies. These French troops have been conquering all over, and they just see all civilians in everywhere else in Europe, including Spain, as things to be stepped on. So with that context of history, let me show you. I'm going to show you these two paintings right here. All right, and you can just tell by the size what kinds of paintings are these. Yeah, these are history paintings. All right, they're the size of history paintings. All right, so the first painting I'm going to show you is called The 2nd of May. And like I said, the French troops are in Spain. The people, the civilians, don't like these French troops. The French troops don't like the civilians. There's a lot of friction. So the civilians rise up in Madrid and they have riots. And the French troops are sent in to stop the riots. And this is called the Dos de Mayo uprising. Dos de Mayo means the 2nd of May. And this painting shows the Mamelukes being attacked by the citizens of Madrid. 100 soldiers were killed in this by the civilians. And the French responded mercilessly, right, and ruthlessly. Okay, so I bet you are wondering, what is a Mameluke or Mameluke? So these are Mamelukes. Do you remember when I talked about Napoleon going into Egypt? Right. So when he went into Egypt, the Mamelukes were the people that he was fighting. And then after that campaign, he got some of them to come into his army. So he had these Egyptian uh, cavalry in his army that fought for him. And these guys are badasses, and the French troops are badasses as well. So it's a good fit. All right, now I told you that 100 soldiers were killed by the civilians, and I told you that the French troops responded ruthlessly. Well, this is the 3rd of May, 1808, the name of this painting, and this shows you the ruthlessness of the response to that. Now, this painting is usually shown to art history students without the context that I have just described. It's usually shown to art history students showing these French troops killing civilians as if it was out of the blue. All right, it's just a mean thing to do. But now that I've told you what happened the day before, where the civilians killed 100 of the soldiers, you now see that there's, even though this is still cruel, it is still wrong. All right, but there's a little bit of context behind it. You understand the reason why the French troops are killing these people. However, this is seen from the uh, the point of view of the civilians. It's sympathetic to the civilians. All right, again, it's a large painting, lots of important history. It's a scale of an important history painting. All right, now compositionally, it has a very interesting composition. This diagonal comes through the painting. This is a directional device that helps guide our eye in there. So our eye follows that hill, and then it sees the troops, and the troops are all pointing their guns towards the figures. And there's one figure that stands out amongst all the others. All right. And I just gave you the hint as to who it is. You probably could, what's the first thing you see when you look at this painting? Yes, the guy in the white shirt with the yellow pants. All right. So, and a couple other compositional things. Look at the colors of this. Like, look how dark that sky is, and then all the grays of the French uniforms and the uh, all the browns, and so there's hardly any color except for the yellow pants and then the blood splatter on the ground, and little pops of red here and there. All right, and that having this guy stand out so much is emphasis. The artist has directed our eye to this figure and he stands out so much because of the emphasis, which is an art element. All right, now here is where we see the sympathy for the civilians. We see their faces, we see the fear and the hope and the terror and the sadness of their faces. But the French troops, we only see the backs of them, and they are almost like robots, or unemotional and um, impersonal and anonymous figures, whereas the civilians, you can see their personalities in there. You can sympathize with them, and their different poses show us their different states of emotion. And this is the romanticism. It's the emotional expression is what is important. Also, this figure is in the same pose as a crucifix. And then if we look closely at his hand, there is a stigmata, that is a miraculous hole in the hand. So he is definitely being compared, and they're definitely referencing the crucifixion. And he is a martyr, just like Jesus is a martyr, and Marat was a martyr, and Socrates was a martyr. Right. So and you can, like, looking at this, you can even see or you can imagine the quotes from the Bible for Christ's crucifixion. Right. Again, I'm comparing this martyr with the death of Marat as a martyr. All right. So going back to history, this state of Spain at this point is that the French troops are stationed everywhere. They're having clashes with the civilians, and there's lots of small little battles, or not even battles, so small little like events between civilians and the troops, and it's chaos everywhere, all over Spain. And I'm showing you the uniforms of the French there on the right for our next pieces. So we're going to look at some prints that were made by Goya. And these prints are quite small, but there's 82 of them. And we're going to look at a few of them. And this is called the Disasters of War. And it is a protest against the violence of 1808. And these are all things that Goya witnessed while he was in Spain. And all of these prints were published 35 years after he died. So he made the prints and never published them. So I'm going to show you this series of prints, and they're called the Disasters of War. The first grouping is going to show you the violence of what Goya witnessed. So we have this scene very much like the 3rd of May painting, where this man is being executed by French soldiers. Here we have a civilian that is chopping the head off of a French soldier. Here we have civilians fighting against French soldiers, and you can see the woman in the back right there. Let's do my pen. This woman back here is throwing rocks at the soldiers. This woman right here has a spear in one arm and a baby in the other arm. So she's fighting with a baby in hand, killing the soldiers. There are soldiers attacking a group of civilians. You can see in the background a woman is being attacked by a soldier. This civilian right here is being split in two by these soldiers. All right, the horrors of war. And like when I say these disasters of war, like people do terrible things in wartime. And with the anonymity of being a soldier, and there's no rules, you can do any kind of horrible thing to people and get away with it, especially 100 years ago, 200 years ago. All right, that's why we have tribunals for there's the Geneva Convention created rules for warfare, and we created this thing called war crimes. These things that I'm showing you would be war crimes today, and people would go on trial after the event. All right, here are some soldiers killing a priest. Here are some civilians killing a soldier. This guy is being hung, but the tree's not long enough or tall enough, so they're pulling him by his neck. This woman is being attacked by a French soldier, and an old lady has a dagger, and she is trying to defend the woman being attacked by the soldier. This man has been tied to a tree, and he's going to be executed. And not only these horrible images, but there's also images of heroism. This woman with the cannon. And I think the story of this lady right here is she held off a group of soldiers with this cannon. All right, it took a lot of bravery. This priest has been executed, and on his neck is a note describing what the crime he was killed for, which was a possession of a knife. And there's the knife hanging around his neck. So more war crimes, mutilations. Now, the second group of the disasters of war is the famine. All right, so the people are starving. When your whole country is at war, and bad things are happening all around, you don't have time to farm. And even if you did, it's likely that the soldiers would come in and burn your farm down or take all your food. So there's mass starvation going on in Spain at this time. So what these images are for. Here's a pile of bodies on a cart that they're taking off. All right, so the horrors of war is in the series of the disasters of war. After some time, though, Napoleon himself comes into France, and he organizes his army, and then we have the traditional army versus army battles and war going on, and it's no longer these skirmishes between soldiers and civilians. Now, going along with the prints that Goya made, here's another one of his famous prints right here called The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. And this is very much like that of Romanticism, with this imagination and the dreamlike state. And it shows the struggle between reason and imagination. The bats and owls are symbols of ignorance and evil. And this is what happens when superstitious beliefs take over science and reason. And it's very similar to the Fuseli nightmare painting. All right. Moving on to the black paintings. I want you to know what these are. All right, so the basic story is that Goya moves into a house in the middle of Spain, and it's in the middle of nowhere. Um, and the house is called the Deaf Man's Villa, and the guy that owned it was deaf, and Goya was going deaf because of an illness that he had. And in this house, he painted on the walls. He painted 14 paintings on the walls and wallpaper of the house. This one right here is the Witch's Sabbath. But these black paintings, all right, these are very dark paintings. Not only dark with colors, but dark with the subject. All right, and so the witch's Sabbath, you see the goat there. That's a demonic symbol or a demonic character, and these witches. These paintings reflect the fear of insanity and Goya's bleak outlook on life. And the paintings originally were painted as murals on the wall, and they later took the paintings off the walls and attached them to canvases. And now they are in a museum, and they are displayed in the same order that they were in the house. So these are the black paintings, and I'm going to go through some of them rather quickly just to give you a sense of these black paintings. But these have these very nightmarish images. Look at the two men, or the man on the right. His face. It looks like things of nightmares, and the two old men on the left. The one that's behind, it looks like a monster trying to talk to this guy. And this image of these two guys who have no legs below the knees, and you can see like there's the legs were painted in, but then they were painted out, and that's almost nightmarish, like stuff of dreams. Look at the scary faces on these figures, these two old ladies that are eating soup. I mean, that's a scary image. And then, one of the saddest pictures is this dog. And I don't know if that dog is like on the other side of a hill or if it's in water and it's up, looking up at a wave that's going to crash down on him. But that dog looks quite sad. All right, so that's the nature of these black paintings. So I'm going to show you one black painting. But first, I have to tell you a story. So this is Kronos, and he is the ruler of the world, and he is paranoid that he would lose his power. And the prophecy says that one of his children is going to overthrow him. So if the prophecy says that one of your children is going to overthrow you and you don't know which one it is, what do? What's the logical thing to do? That's right. You eat your children. All right. So he ate his children. He ate. Right. So he ate his five children, but his wife was pregnant with a sixth. And so she goes away to the island of Crete to give birth to the sixth child. And she comes back with a stone wrapped in a baby's clothes. And she fools Kronos into eating the stone. Meanwhile, Zeus, the baby, the sixth baby, grows up in Crete. And when he's old enough, he and his mom and let's see, Gaia come to him. Let me back up. He and his mom and Gaia hatch a plan to rescue his brothers and to take over Kronos because he's not a good guy. So they give him food that has a poison in it that causes him to throw up, and he throws up all his children. Right, and they team up together along with the Titans and Cyclopes, and they take over Zeus, or not Zeus, but Kronos. Kronos gets together with his brothers and sisters, and he gets some Cyclopes and Titans, and all of them team up against Kronos. I told you that story so I can show you this painting. It's called Saturn Devouring One of His Children. And it's part of the black paintings. Has anybody seen this image before? Yeah. And just look at how unrealistic the proportions of Saturn is. And he's got such a small head, and he's got bulging eyes. He opens his mouth wide to gnaw on the arms of his son. And look at the corpse's mutilated body, with blood streaming from his wounds, and the bleak background. All right, and this recalls the disasters of war. And this is, the black paintings show his interest in dark and horrific themes. And then if you look, like, what was the first thing that you noticed in this painting? Yeah, and what for me, it's the back of the child, like the shoulders, like that's the brightest part, and it's in the center, so that's the emphasis, and it's even like outlined in red, and red catches our eye, so that is the emphasis of the painting. And if you look closely, you can see like he uses thick brushstrokes. There are some painters that we've looked at, especially like David and Anga, who you would not be able to see any brushstrokes. They are so perfect in their painting and so crystal clear that you don't see the brushstrokes. And but this is now we're moving away from that. We see these heavy brushstrokes. We saw in the Fuseli painting of the Nightmare, the horse had rough painting on it. This has rough painting on it, and this like thick paint is called impasto. So artists are starting to get a little bit creative with the application of the paint and using it to be an expressive tool, not just what is being pictured, but the manner in which the paint is applied is expressive. Uh, some art historians think that he was looking at Peter Paul Rubens' version of this painting of Saturn eating his children. But other art historians doubt this interpretation because Goya is in Goya's painting, it looks like he's eating a full grown person rather than an infant. And it has a very similar color scheme as the 3rd of May. And it also is reminiscent of Caravaggio's paintings with that dark background and the bright highlight. And there might be a connection between Goya's state of mind and the black paintings. There is an association between Saturn and Saturnine with temperaments or melancholy. And, I talked about, do you guys remember when I talked about melancholy and the four humors of the body? And that this belief that your mood and your health is determined by the four humors went well into the mid 1800s, and so this definitely fits within that. And so Goya was in a disturbed state of mind when he painted this, and he could have been suffering from what he believed would be melancholy. The black paintings express the deepest, darkest aspects of his psyche. And perhaps these paintings express the artist's own fears of losing his powers in the face of his declining physical and mental health. And perhaps these black paintings are political allegories, some art historians say. Spain's leader, Ferdinand VII, was oppressive and refused to adapt to the the evolution of modern life and society. And at the same time, Spain was still dealing with the Inquisition, which I never really got into, but that was a dark time in Spanish history. All right, are there any questions about anything that I've covered so far? So this finishes us for chapter 27, part 2. We're going to get into part 3 now. All right, so much art history, never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We are still in chapter 27, and we will begin part 3, in which we talk about Jericho. We've all got his name. This is a large-scale portrait of an officer of the French Imperial Guard, and this guy, this particular person that's been painted, is a friend of the artist, and he is a Chaucer in the Napoleon's army. So I bet you're wondering what a Chaucer is. So a Chaucer is light cavalry, and they rode small, quick horses and carried light weapons, ideal for scouting and skirmishing. It is the heavy cavalry, including the cuirassiers and lancers, who were armored and would they were mounted on powerful horses, and there was the heavy cavalry that would charge into an enemy's line of soldiers. All right, now I want to point out his hat. And if we look at the hat, the closest thing I can find over here is this guy over here in the lower right. All right, he has this black cap, and he has this the red fabric coming off of it, and it looks like it's a this plume in the front should be like black with a red tip, and that has different connotations. But when I look down here, it says parade uniform. So what that tells me is Homeboy's wearing his parade uniform in a battle. All right. So I do want to point out that this is not a moment of military victory as was commonly depicted by the neoclassical artists of the period. This is not an idealized scene created using the ancient Roman or Greek imagery. Jericho chose to depict a romanticized scene full of drama. This guy is charging away from the viewer. It's a retreat. The battle is about to be lost. And so the figure on here is twisting backwards with the sword ready. And he's in a dramatic, contorted pose. And the officer seems to look back in a sad resignation that the battle has been lost. So rather than a triumphant hero, which would have been a neoclassical painting, instead we have a struggling, brooding, sad hero. He is uncertain of his fate, and the tension is enhanced by the bold color choices and varied light effects. So notice that most of the colors in here are, somewhere between grays and browns. It's like a mixture of grays and browns. But the little spots of red on this guy, like the red belt, the red cuff, the red plume, the red on the hat, all right, those kind of pop out and get our attention. This painting helped to launch Jericho's career, and it was well received when it was exhibited in the 1812 Paris Salon. And military figures were a popular theme with Jericho. All right, do we have time? We're out of here at 10 minutes. We are going to begin Monday with this next painting. It would be an injustice to stop or rush this next painting. One of my all-time favorite paintings. So we will pick this up on Monday. All right, any questions about anything? Any questions about the beast? I'm going to try to be grading this weekend so I can get caught up with you guys and caught up with the guys over at Cy Park. All right.